Okay. So I don't have your scores for the last test up yet. It'll happen in the next, I'd say, 2 days. Okay. So we're going to start on the next section. We're going to start with sex. We've already done a little bit about sex, but you know, sex is such a great thing that we should probably spend extra time on it. And then we're going to talk about IVF, which is fertility treatments, and stem cells. Okay. If you ever want to read a great book that's pretty funny, Dr. Tatiana's Sex Advice for All Creation by Olivia Judson. Humans have, I would say, a pretty boring sex life compared to a lot of other organisms out there, a lot of other animals. So she gives, I mean, there's some wild stuff going on out there. You have no idea. So sex is, we've already gone over meiosis and, of course, why there is sex, which is that it feels good. That's why there's sex, of course. No. Reproduction. But if you actually think about it, sexual reproduction is actually a fairly costly enterprise. First of all, there's the problem of if you're asexual, you can, we went over this the last bit. If you're asexual, you can, let's say you have 10 individuals, you can each provide a copy of yourself. If you're sexual reproduction, you need 5 males and 5 females, and you're only going to produce 5 offspring. So there's a twofold cost. Plus, when there is sex, you have to go find a mate. Of course, only your offspring are only actually half related to you, compared to if you were asexual reproduced, you'd be completely related to your offspring. You'd be a clone. So, in terms of asexual reproduction, it's easy. You don't have to worry about mate location or STDs or anything like that. Of course, if you don't like yourself and you're just producing more copies of yourself, well, that's kind of a bummer. But if you don't hate yourself, you're good to go. We know that sexual reproduction combines gametes. Now, are gametes haploid or diploid? Sperm and eggs, are they haploid or diploid? Huh? I don't care if you're wrong. Anybody? Diploid? What are you? Are you diploid or haploid? Di is what? 2. Okay. So, gametes are haploid, right? There's only 1 chromosome for each. That's what happens with meiosis. And when those 2 gametes interact and fertilize, then you have a zygote and a diploid individual. Okay. So, organs that produce gametes are collectively called what? What kind of cells? Are they somatic cells or are they germline cells? Okay. And what kind of cell division is it? Mitosis or meiosis? So, okay, we found a new aquatic species that reproduces sexually. Individuals release gametes into the water where fertilization takes place. One parent is big, aggressive, and releases larger gametes. The other parent is smaller, kind of cute, and releases smaller gametes. Who is the female? A or B? Anybody? A? B? I know, humans, right? Where the males are big and aggressive, right? And the females are smaller and daintier. The thing is, who has the big gametes and who has the small gametes?
Small gametes are males.
Females, right? Females. So, it doesn't matter what size the individual is. It only matters what size their gametes are. Now, we've talked a little bit about, now that there are a lot of different organisms that actually have only one size gametes. They're isogamy, they come together and they fertilize, and that's that. But a lot of species have small and large. So small gametes are from males. Large gametes are from females. There are a lot of animals out there in which the female is the much larger. Okay? Now, there's all kinds of different ways of fertilization. Let's say eggs are laid in a stream by a salmon, a female. The male comes along and then releases sperm on top of them. Okay? So there's external fertilization. Seems kind of boring, but if you've ever seen salmon spawn, I can tell you the males get pretty excited. Of course, plants, they have flowers. A lot of plants have perfect flowers. That means they have the parts for male and female. So they make both ovules, the eggs, and they make pollen. They could self-fertilize, but a lot of them have mechanisms to avoid that. And then finally, these are coral, and when they reproduce, they either release sperm or eggs into the water column, millions and millions and millions and millions, and they always coordinate so that one species will do it on a certain day at a certain time of the day, another species different, and males and females, they all coordinate together. Now, there's also, of course, internal fertilization. That's what we have. It does feel good. Now, the thing about internal fertilization, first of all, it started out in the oceans, of course. So, but one thing it did do is on land, on dry land where water is not as easily available, it allowed, let's say, animals to move away from water source. Okay? And we have this idea about sex, and there's two sexes, right? Now plants, a lot of plants are what are called hermaphrodites. So I mentioned they have flowers that have the male parts that produce pollen and the female parts that produce ovules. There's a lot of animals that are also hermaphrodites, like a lot of banana slugs, if you ever go into the Pacific Northwest, where they have both male and female parts. They could fertilize themselves, but often they fertilize each other. So they're both male and female. And then there's also something called sequential hermaphrodites. Anybody remember Nemo, the clownfish? Okay. Now, their biology was a little off on Nemo. First of all, clownfish start out as kind of juvenile, asexual males. They don't reproduce. They are not sexually mature yet. And then there's usually one male that's dominant, that's fully sexually mature, and there's a female, finally, that's also sexually dominantly mature. If the male dies, one of the other juveniles turns into a dominant male. The female dies, the dominant male turns into a female. You say, how does that happen? Hormones. So this whole business about, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, well, clownfish, they don't have that problem. In their life cycle, many of them are both male, they start out as male, and end up as female. There's also the other way around as well. Well, Nemo, he's a little guy, right? So he would have been a juvenile clownfish. We'll say that mom got eaten. So there's his dad. Now, in the story, his dad is a big deal, but his dad really should have just turned into his mom. Okay? And then another one, either him or someone else, would have turned into the dominant male. Eventually, if he was lucky, he would end up being a dominant female clownfish. But that's not what they did. I guess it would have confused people about, sex and gender and all that kind of stuff. But in the real world, these roles are not necessarily strictly defined. Furthermore, there's actually some species, like mushrooms, and like these little single-celled creatures called paramecium, that have thousands of different sexes. And furthermore, they actually, reproduction and sex are actually split. They don't coincide with each other. So like paramecium, what they do is they get together, they exchange genetic material, that new individual incorporates genetic material into themselves, into their own genome. So it'd be like if you had sex with someone, well, both of you would become something entirely different because you'd be getting all these new traits from having sex with someone. And then it's only later with the paramecium that they actually divide by mitosis into individuals. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on here. Now, you guys have heard about black widows. What do females normally do with the males? Yeah. This praying mantis does the same sort of thing. The female is the larger of the two, by the way. Now, it turns out, any of you, when you go on a date, does your date ever like give you something like chocolate or take you to dinner? And either gender, I mean, you know, you can take your boyfriend or your whatever, okay. Well, a lot of animals do the same sort of thing. They bring their mates a present. Not a diamond ring, but commonly something they could eat. It's called a nuptial gift. And like a male will bring, there's this fly where the female normally gets a gift that's wrapped in silk. Or with grasshoppers, there's a spur on the male's legs. And so when they go to the female, they either give the female the gift of this other insect to eat, or the female chews on a spur and kind of keeps her occupied while they're copulating with her. So in fact, the bigger the gift, the better, because it keeps the female more occupied for a longer period of time, and so the male can more likely inseminate her compared to other males. But the ultimate nuptial gift is with black widow spiders and other spiders and this mantis, in that the male is actually the nuptial gift. So the male comes in, the female bites his head off, but while his head is bit off, he copulates with the female. Sounds really sexy, doesn't it? Now you're thinking, why are there nuptial gifts? Well, nuptial gifts serve two purposes. First of all, is to get so the female eats the nuptial gift and doesn't eat the male, except in this case. And it also provides food for producing eggs by the female. Okay? So, in this case, the male is actually the nuptial gift. He's a high resource, full of all kinds of good things that the female can then use to turn into eggs. So even though he gives up his life, only has sex once, I guess it's still worth it. I'm not sure. Okay. Now, this is an anglerfish. Let's see, here we are. Okay. Now, the big one is actually the female. She's gigantic. The males are these little tiny guys. And the thing you have to remember is males are just generally sperm delivery devices. That's all males do. That's all any males do. All you guys in here who think, you know, you're a big shot, You're just a sperm delivery device. That's it. Beyond that, you don't matter. Okay? Now, anglerfish have taken it to the absolute extreme where these males, they're small, they are attracted to a female, and then they burrow into the female and become parasites, but they deliver sperm. And that's their whole life. That's the end of it, right? The female does everything else. The males don't eat, they don't have to eat because they're getting all their food from the females. All they're doing is donating sperm. And they become these little guys, they're basically just a swimming gonad. That's it. There's none of this fighting over females or being a tough guy. They don't have tough guys. They're all just little swimming gonads, swimming around looking for a female. And that's it. Okay. Eggs and sperm. Let me get this. Hold on a second. So, if you remember during meiosis, there's all sorts of ways for genetic diversity to increase. And so first, there's crossing over in meiosis 1. There's also independent assortment. So which group gets that individual's either male chromosome or female chromosomes. And there's something like 8 trillion unique combinations. Well, there's also all this competition between sperm. There's, what, 300 billion sperm or something like that, or 300, forget. Anyway, a lot, but only one of them actually fertilizes the egg. So that's a unique individual. No two sperm are alike. They all have a different complement of genetic material. Okay? So I know it seems like, well, we seem unique. We can't imagine us not being here. But if a different sperm had fertilized your mom's egg, you would not be here. Someone else would be here. Okay? So if you remember, sperm are produced by meiosis. The testes also produce a lot of hormones, androgens like testosterone, things like that. And then other things are added, like seminal fluid from the prostate. Okay? So there's a lot going on into producing sperm. Now, sperm are the products, they're haploid, right? They're the products of meiosis. Let's see. Okay. Now, for females, the same thing happens, except that meiosis actually produces one egg and these 3 different polar bodies. female sexual anatomy, it also produces hormones like estrogen and progesterone, which governs maintaining a pregnancy. So, does fertilization happen in the uterus, in the fallopian tubes, in, let's see, the oviduct? Anybody? We just saw that. So where do they say that the sperm actually meets the egg? Well, it's the fallopian tube's oviduct. Okay? So they swim all the way up there. Now, for human females, I mentioned this a long, long time ago. Well, let's say for most females, they're only reproductively accessible at certain times of the year. So for plants, when they produce flowers, often in the springtime or the summertime, something like that. For animals, female usually goes into estrus when her eggs are fertile. But for humans, human females are essentially receptive all the time, which is very unusual in terms of reproduction. So, each month one egg cell is released from the ovary. It takes the eggs about 5 days to move through the oviducts to the uterus, but an unfertilized egg is viable for only the first 24 hours after ovulation. Okay, so ovulation takes about 5 days. Sperm are viable for up to how long, do you think? A, B, C, or D? Okay, good. And eggs are viable for the first 24 hours after ovulation. Okay. So, fertilization can actually result, in other words, where we get a zygote, from sex up to 5 days prior to ovulation until 1 day after ovulation. So that's a 6-day window in terms of the ovulation event. Outside of that time period, the probability of getting fertilization drops dramatically. So, there's something called the morning after pill. So you've been bad, you haven't been using birth control, and you don't want to have a kid, so you get something called Plan B. That's called the morning after pill. Now, Plan B, all it does is delay ovulation. It doesn't kill the egg or anything like that. So you can protect yourself and say, okay, well, I better go get some Plan B. Now, in terms of development, so once we have a fertilized egg, how are all the other cells that are produced, how are they produced? With mitosis or meiosis? Huh? M-I-T or M-E-I? Which one gives you the same number of chromosomes? Mitosis. Okay? So, from now on, the embryo is just a bunch of dividing cells. Now, it's the blastocyst stage that is actually implanted into the uterus, where it remains, in terms of humans, for the next 9 months. Okay. So normally, if there's no fertilization, your endometrium sheds 14 days after ovulation, when women have their periods. If fertilization actually occurs, the embryo secretes this hormone, and it prevents further release of eggs. Now, once the embryo, the blastocyst, is implanted into the uterus, there's the formation of placenta. And there are specific genes that control this. And the placenta is the go-between that attaches the embryo to the mother. So all nutrients, oxygen, everything like that passes through the placenta to the embryo. Okay. So it's HCG, which is human chorionic gonadotropin hormone. And in fact, if you buy a home pregnancy test, that's what that is actually measuring, is that hormone. Okay. So now, the big deal is, how can people limit fertility? So, at one point, one of your ancestors, women commonly had, let's say, 10, 12 offspring. Many died during childbirth. Usually only 3 or 4 might have made it to adulthood. And usually as people get wealthier and better educated, they tend to have fewer children and pour more of their resources into their fewer children. So that's why, like nowadays, infant mortality is much lower than it used to be in the past. Now, Plan B delays ovulation, and you can also prevent ovulation. And there's a whole bunch of different methods, as you know. There's birth control pills, there's injections, there's implantation sticks, and then there's IUDs, also often with hormones. Now, the latter two are the ones that last for a long time. So, let's say a woman decides she doesn't want to get pregnant for a while. She uses those two methods. These are reversible. So it's not like if you use them, you can't get pregnant after that. All they do is they stop fertilization from actually happening. And then there's a bunch of other ways. Of course, condoms. It's weird how, I mean, it's really terrible how it's all really on women. All these different things. Apparently, it's just too difficult for guys in terms of hormones and all that. But that's actually BS, to tell you the truth. If they had put as much research into a male birth control pill or something like that, we would have had one by now. So, as males, you know, that's another strike, I guess, against us, you know. But remember, our whole reason for being here is to fertilize women. I mean, that's it. There's no other reason for us to be on the planet. We do a whole bunch of other things, like blow up things, but that's just part of the whole scheme of having sex and fertilization. But anyway, there are condoms, there are diaphragms, and then there's my favorite, abstinence. The idea of going without sex, it's beyond what I can fathom. I think most other people feel the same way. So, even though there are a lot of groups that push abstinence, like it's just say no. It's like wanting sex is like wanting to eat. You're hungry, right? It's a very, very primal force. And even if you have people that swear they're going to stay abstinent until, let's say, they get married or something, abstinence is famous for not working. Abstinence is actually famous for producing lots of offspring. So, if you really don't want to produce offspring, you need something besides abstinence. Because willpower, when it comes to sex, it doesn't stand a chance. Now, there's also, of course, if women get pregnant, abortion is still legal in this country. We'll see for how much longer. When I was growing up, of course, abortion wasn't legal. There was still the same amount of abortions going on, but they were backroom abortions, and a lot of people, a lot of women actually suffered from bad abortions, where they would get an infection, some other problem, they died. In fact, it was fairly common for women to get backstreet abortions by some guy and then end up showing up in an emergency room with a raging infection in which she finally died. So that's what it was like before abortion was available. Now, I know people have problems in terms of religious objection or whatever. Of course, the pro-choice side is basically leaving it up to the individual. It doesn't say you have to get an abortion. It just says that's an option open to you. Whereas the anti-abortion groups, it's like, well, no one should get an abortion. Now, there's also a pill that is very effective at terminating an abortion. It used to be called RU486. It actually is it's a combination of two pills. It's this and I think something called methotrexate. And you can get these pills from your doctor. Now, there are some states that have already put a barrier to getting these pills. it said that the barrier says you have to get it from a doctor. But there's no place to get them in the state, like Texas. And so women go and have them sent through the mail. But if they're inspected and found in the mail, then the women get a misdemeanor for breaking the law. Of course, that sounds about right, right? Because, I mean, it's their fault for having sex, isn't it? Isn't it the fault of the women for having sex and getting pregnant? It's not the guy's fault. Remember, we don't do much. All we do is deliver sperm. Anyway, that's the idea that's going on in this country, and it's been going on for a long time. So, I guess you know where I stand. Okay. Now, STDs, those are sexually transmitted diseases. Do any of these methods actually protect you against STDs? Any of them? Condom, right, that's about it. Okay, so percent effectiveness in terms of preventing pregnancies. We've already talked a little bit about abstinence. If you want to get pregnant, then practice abstinence. I know that says not having sex, but you won't be able to do it for all that long. So, there's other ways, and then there's the different methods include, so sperm and egg never have contact, like condoms and things like that. There's no real risks. So the rhythm method, abstinence, that means you don't have sex for about a week each month. But it's still, I don't know what the percentage is for actual failure of that, but it's fairly high. Okay. Now, there are people who have a problem with infertility. It can either be the male or the female, or the fact that they have a genomic, what's called genomic incompatibility, and I'll talk to you a little bit about it. But first of all, like Henry VIII, as you know, he had a whole bunch of wives. He took England out of the Catholic Church because the church wouldn't give an annulment. The problem is he kept producing, I think he did produce some daughters. He didn't produce sons. And if you remember, sons are the ones, when I talked about the heterogametic sex, the sex that usually shows problems, he wasn't producing sons. So there was probably something that was wrong with his sperm, or something that was wrong in terms of how the sperm fertilized eggs, so that fertilized egg that was going to be a male didn't survive. Then there's women that have trouble. I read a study about the causes for failed pregnancies. About 20 to 30% is actually, the problem with it is with the placenta. Then there's also a certain percentage that has to do with the gametes themselves. And then there's something called gametic incompatibility, where the alleles that you have don't really mesh with the alleles of someone else. So sometimes you hear cases where, let's say a woman says, I can't get pregnant. She tries and tries, nothing happens. And then finally, let's say they're married and they break up. Gets a new boyfriend, he says, I can't get pregnant. They start having sex, she gets pregnant. That's actually a fairly common occurrence. It's called genomic incompatibility, where the original guy's sperm and her eggs don't produce viable embryos, but some other guy is just fine. Now, there's all sorts of different ways to combat infertility. As you know, there's fertility clinics all over the place. They're not particularly well regulated. They're expensive. There's a number of things kind of associated with them that, well, oftentimes they don't work all that well. In fact, that's why they often harvest a bunch of eggs from the woman and then implant a bunch of eggs into the woman once those are fertilized. So this is the first, what we call test tube baby. It was in Great Britain in 1970. So in vitro fertilization, IVF, you give a woman certain hormones so that her eggs mature many at once. And that's called superovulation. So instead of releasing one egg a month, the woman releases a whole bunch of mature ova. Depending on male fertility, if the male fertility is fine, they'll often just try to fertilize the egg in a test tube, let it grow for a number of days into a blastocyst, and then implant into the uterus. Or they actually take sperm and inject it into the egg. And then, of course, they can see right away whether it's actually fertilized or not. So the zygote, single-celled fertilized egg, is cultured for a number of days, allowed to divide. When the embryo gets to the blastocyst stage, it's transferred to the uterus. Hopefully it works. They usually, like I said, implant a number of eggs. You know, so if one doesn't take, they've at least got one. Unfortunately, because a number of fertilized eggs are implanted, about 30% of IVF procedures produce multiples. That means twins, triplets, quads, which is not necessarily what the couple signed up for. When you end up with 8. So now these children are not identical. Remember, they each came from a separate egg and separate sperm. But there's still 8 of them. To make your life miserable, right? I mean, there's 8 of them. Can you imagine? I'd kill myself. Or no, never mind. I can't say that. But maybe what I would do is I'd raise them and then sell them on the slave market. You can get a lot of money, right, for kids. The Tuareg tribes of northern Africa, they love slaves. So you get a lot of money that way. That's what I would do personally. And then I tell all the other ones, no, you were just born. No brothers and sisters for you. Anyway, they're starting now to not implant a whole bunch of fertilized eggs in the uterus because of this very problem. Now, you can do genetic testing to see if perhaps an embryo has let's say, a recessive mutation. And then you can decide what you want to do at that point, whether you want to terminate the pregnancy or not. Embryos can actually be frozen, in other words, fertilized embryos, so they kind of exist in a semi-state of limbo for as long as you want. They usually freeze them in nitrogen. And then you can thaw them out and then implant them. In fact, there's been cases where men and women they've divorced, and there's been a fight over the embryos, if they had any. Okay, so this is, they use liquid nitrogen. Now, it turns out as the women age, their eggs age too, and they become less potent. So what some women are doing now is they're actually harvesting their eggs in their early 20s or mid-20s and freezing them. And then once they've gone to college and kind of got a career going or whatever they want to do with their lives, then they decide, okay, in my 30s I'll implant them, I'll get pregnant. Because fertility declines with age. The same thing actually happens with guys. I mean, there are men who fathered offspring when they were 80 or 90 years old. There was a famous senator from South Carolina, Strom Thurmond. He was a white supremacist. Every 5 years, he would marry a new Miss South Carolina and have more children. Also, when he was in his youth, he actually had sex with some of the servants. Now this isn't back in the 1800s. This is 1970, 1980, things like that. And in fact, he's actually got kids from an African-American servant. Okay? He was a total scumbag. I mean, just plus, he lived until he was like 98. You would think that if there was a God, that it would strike him dead. But anyway, never mind. Okay. Now, let's say you have an embryo that's in the blastocyst stage. these are all basically stem cells. Actually, the inner cells of the blastocyst are all stem cells. So we're going to get into stem cells now. You've heard about stem cells, I'm sure. They are undifferentiated cells, in other words, cells that haven't become muscle or eye or neurons or any other kind of tissue. There are different levels of stem cells in terms of what they can become. There are embryonic stem cells that essentially, like these from the blastocyst stage, can become any kind of other cell type. Then there are adult stem cells. So like in my bones, in my bone marrow produces blood cells, various which ones. So those are adult stem cells. They've already kind of gone on a certain track to become a certain kind of cell, but they haven't matured into that. And there's many different kinds of blood cells. So obviously there's red blood cells, but let's say white blood cells that are part of your immune system. Those cells can become any kinds of those white blood cells. Now there's been a big thing about, well, a blastocyst, that's a fertilized egg with 60 or so cells in it, is considered living, and that if you destroy it, there's a lot of people who feel like you're ending life. I have to say though, I've never been able to talk to a blastocyst. They don't talk back. You can't even hardly see them. Okay, but anyway, they can be used for embryonic stem cells. You can also get fetal cord blood, which will have some embryonic stem cells in them as well. Okay. So stem cells are undifferentiated cells, right? And they can self-renew, create more stem cells. And they can divide throughout their lifetime. And certain stem cells can have the ability to give rise to many types of other cells, in some cases, all different types of cells. Once they get to a certain point in the differentiation process, they become terminally differentiated into an adult stem cell. So in other words, these are all different kinds of cells that, let's say, an embryonic stem cell can become. Now, they've also managed to create, well, I guess this is about it, so I'll leave it there. I'm going to open up some top hat questions, and I'll have, by Thursday, I'll have your grades up on the last test.